Part of our content this week deals with genetic and congenital disorders. We could spend an entire semester on this. I printed on this slide 3 very credible websites for you to refer to when you start your lecture exams. Let's review some genetics terms. An allele is one of 2 or more versions of a gene. An individual inherits 2 alleles for each gene, one from each parent. If the 2 alleles are the same, the individual is homozygous for that gene. If the alleles are different, the individual is heterozygous. If someone inherits 2 dominant alleles, they are homozygous dominant. If they inherit 2 recessive alleles, they are homozygous recessive. Dominant alleles are given a capital letter, and recessive alleles are given a lowercase letter. A genotype is an individual's collection of genes. The term also can refer to the 2 alleles inherited for a particular gene. The genotype is expressed when the information encoded in the gene's DNA is used to make protein and RNA molecules. The expression of the genotype contributes to the individual's observable traits called the phenotype. A character is a heritable feature, like flower color. A trait is the phenotype you see. If flower color is the character, then one trait may be a purple flower. Mendel, through his study of sweet pea plants, made 3 very important observations, often referred to as laws. 1. That the inheritance of each trait is determined by units or factors that are passed on to descendants unchanged. These units are now called genes. 2. That an individual inherits one such allele of a gene from each parent for each trait. This is his law of segregation, and the gametes unite randomly. 3. That a trait may not show up in an individual but can still be passed on to the next generation. This would be a recessive allele. For example, if heterozygous, one is dominant, the phenotype is observed, and the other is recessive, don't see it. Some more terminology to keep in mind as I go through this lecture. Congenital means a condition present at birth, though it might not be noticeable until later in life. A gene locus is an address on a chromosome. Much like your home has a street address, genes are located not only on a specific chromosome, but identified by their position on the long or short arm of the chromosome. A mutation is a heritable change. Codominance means expression of both alleles. One is not dominant over the other. The best example would be the ABO blood groups. A polymorphism is a natural variation in a gene, DNA sequence, or chromosome that have no adverse effects on the individual and occur with fairly high frequency in the general population. I guess you could think of it as a mutation with no consequence to the organism. Gene penetrance refers to the inheritance of a dominant trait, but the dominant phenotype isn't necessarily seen. An example of this would be a dominant mutation with 100% penetrance means if the person inherits that dominant allele, they will display the phenotype. In contrast, if there is a dominant mutation with 50% penetrance, then the person who inherits this allele will have a 50% chance of displaying the phenotype. And lastly, gene expression is a 2-step process that involves transcription and translation. Let's discuss the usual suspects for causing birth defects. Genetic factors. This can be a single gene or multifactorial inheritance of chromosomal aberrations. These causes will be a big focus of this lecture. Environmental factors. Maternal disease like maternal PKU, infections, say from the human parvovirus or measles, drugs or dietary deficiency during pregnancy, like neural tube defects that occur from a lack of folic acid or vitamin B12. Intrauterine factors, Fetal crowding. Anytime a mother carries more than one fetus, this is considered to be a high-risk pregnancy, as one fetus may get a better blood supply and outgrow the other, as seen in this picture. Positioning of a fetus in utero can be a problem if a limb is being compressed, for example, club foot. And lastly, entanglement by an umbilical cord can lead to fetal death if around the neck, or improper development of the limb if wrapped around a limb. Let's start our focus on single gene disorders resulting from a mutation in a single gene. Remember, there are typically two alleles for a gene. If the mutation occurs in a gene that is found on an autosome, that's a chromosome that is not a sex chromosome like X or Y, then it will follow typical Mendelian inheritance, meaning if only one of the alleles is mutated, the person would be heterozygous for the mutation. If it occurs in both alleles, they are homozygous. If the mutation occurs on the X chromosome, this is considered to be sex-linked. The Y chromosome has very few genes on it. Almost all sex-linked mutations are noticed on the X chromosome. Let me reiterate this on the next slide.